everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Valerie Grust. I am an Olympic swimmer from Guatemala and the creator of this webinar series. I will be your host and speaker for today. And we are all super, super excited to welcome you to this new edition of Underwater Chats by Panama Aquatics. It was created by and for athletes with the goal of creating a safe conversation space for crucial subjects of development and support that are not commonly discussed in the aquatic community. We have a great webinar prepared for you today. I absolutely love this panel. We're going to be talking all about managing body perceptions after retiring from aquatic sports. We will discuss everything from the stages, that we went through as aquatic athletes as we retired through the sport. We have an awesome panel. We have an open water swimmer, we have an artistic swimmer, a diver. We just have a lot of experiences here, and hopefully we'll give you guys, a lot of tips on how to navigate this process if you are a retired athlete, or if you are in the process of thinking of retiring and you're wondering, like, what do I do after my sport? And, what are the things I should consider through this process? So super, super excited to be talking to this awesome panel. But first, we have Erica Rose-Dancic, an open water swimmer from the USA. So Erica, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm super excited about the conversation this evening. So my name's Erica Rose-Dancic. I was on the U.S. open water team for about 12 years. Started off in the pool and then transitioned over to open water where my passion was. And throughout my career, got into longer and longer distance swimming. But wrapped up, 2008 was my last world championship. So it's been a minute since I've been in the water. I now do some marathon running. I work full time. I work in the veterinary medicine industry. I was in human healthcare and transitioned over to animal healthcare. And most importantly, have two little boys. So that's what truly keeps me busy when I'm not. I think I actually run marathons to escape from the two little boys sometimes. But I had a 4-year-old and an almost 4-year-old, almost 7-year-old. And I live in Cleveland, Ohio. So eager for the conversation. Thanks so much for including me.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time, Erica. And then we have Javier Ruiz Sanchez, an artistic swimmer from Puerto Rico.
Hi, everyone. Super excited to join you guys. Definitely a conversation that I'm very excited to have. My name is Javier Ruiz Sanchez. I am an artistic swimmer. I retired last summer after my last World Championship final. Now I work in the healthcare department industry. Life is very different outside of the water for sure. But I have definitely enjoyed this new chapter of my life, and I'm super excited to be able to share some of my experiences from being an athlete and having retired and everything that goes with that. And yes, super excited to be here today. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Javi. And last but definitely not least, we have Aaron Scannell, a diver from the USA.
Hey everyone, I dove at Northwestern quite a few years ago. I did springboard and platform diving there. And now I own a marketing and project management company and I live in Phoenix, Arizona.
Great. Thank you so much. All exciting connections here, both, Erica, Aaron, and myself, all, we're at Northwestern, so we share that. And Javier and I share, part of the Panama Aquatics team. We're so excited to bring you guys, a lot of stuff on athlete development this summer. So I appreciate all of you guys. And with that, I'm excited to open the conversation with our panel and transition into the Q&A section of the webinar later on. So if you guys have any questions as the webinar goes through, please feel free to enter them in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be sure to address them at the end of the webinar. So with that, I want to get us started. I feel like retirement is such an interesting phase to go through, right? We either plan it, we either abruptly have to end our careers, which is what personally happened to me. I had to medically retire due to major injuries, major reconstructions after swimming. So I know everyone has gone through a different phase. So I wanted to go through each panelist. If you guys would be comfortable sharing, a little bit about your retirement experience, what that looked like for you, to kind of set the context for, you know, our audience and understanding, you know, everyone goes through someone different, through something different, right? And we all experience different things, have different motives for retiring, comes at different stages of our lives too. So Javi, why don't we start with you?
Oh God. So I retired, like I said, last summer. My retirement for a lot of people came as a surprise. For me, it was definitely not a surprise. It was something that I had thought about for many months prior to that official announcement. I had spoken with my coaches and my teammates in the National Federation about retiring and how we would retired in the middle of an Olympic year. So my last competition was the World Championship. I wanted it to be the World Championship because it was the only time in our Olympic cycle and artistic swimming. For those of you who don't know, mixed duets are not an Olympic event at the Olympics. So we can only compete them at the Central American Games, which is our local continental championship games, and also at the World Championships or the World Cups through World Aquatics. So I knew I wanted to have one last chance at competing the mixed duet in the male solo. So I decided and chose World Championships in Japan as my last competition. Um, like I said, for some people, it was very surprising because I had just made top 8 in the world at a World Championship final. And I think a lot of people just expected me to keep going. But deep down, I was just so happy with how my career was going. And I always said when I started the sport that I wanted, because I knew people that weren't able to retire on their own terms, I always said that I wanted to have that chance to be able to make the decision for myself and not have either the federation or an injury. And thankfully, I had that chance. So that is the main reason why I retired. And I was just ready to move on and start a new chapter in my life and just be a professional outside of the water.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for sharing, Javi. And Erica, how about you? What was your experience?
Sure. So, similarly, my last race was World Championships. It was in 2008 in Spain. And so I had planned by that point, I knew that that was going to be my last race. And I would say it was kind of in part on my own terms, but I loved the sport. I loved competing. I loved traveling. I loved the people. Like I just loved everything about it. Um, at the time, so 2008 was the first time that open water it had become an Olympic sport. And at that point, so it's 10K is the open water Olympic distance. I was doing like 25K and beyond. So I was like a little bit too slow for the 10K, but could swim forever. So the Olympics at that point weren't realistic. And what I had come to find out, I was in my late 20s, was that it was very difficult to support myself financially as a swimmer. Very few people, you know, can do that. And so open water marathon swimming wasn't going to support me living in Chicago at that point in time. Um, so I retired and had to, you know, as I think we'll talk a little bit about, but had to figure out what was next, right? Because I had literally spent my life underwater. Like I hadn't done internships. I didn't know what I was interested in. I didn't know what to do with myself. And we'll talk a little bit, I'm sure, about the kind of the body image and eating part that goes with that. But like all of it was swimming for me. And so to kind of figure that out in my late 20s was a challenge. So, but yeah, I mean, it was the right thing to do. Like you said, you know, I wanted to figure out what being a professional was like outside of the water. And I don't know how many years, 15 years later, I'm still kind of figuring that out, I think, but it's been a journey. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. And I guess Erin, similar, you know, to Erica, you retired also in Chicago. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, so I retired in 2019 and I was ready. I was battling a lot of injuries. I finished my last collegiate year and then wrapped up after that, and I was battling wrist injuries, back injuries, and just like some other injuries that came from having those injuries. And um I just think there's a point in your athletic career where, I mean, I knew I wasn't going to do I didn't want to continue on and didn't have that opportunity. And I was not upset by that by any means. Like, there's lots of life outside of the pool, and I was ready to explore some of those things and kind of see what else life could be, and start a new season. So lots of mixed emotions, but I think relief was probably the one that hit home the most for me, just because you don't have to hit the water at 35 miles an hour in regular life, which is nice.
That is really nice. Yeah. And Aaron and I have had multiple conversations about this, like what it is retiring. And I feel like all of you, now that I'm hearing your full retirement stories, it's interesting that you had kind of like a plan, right? It was either a meet, it was either the end of the season. At least for me, it was kind of like in the middle of Olympic year. I already had my spot to qualify. I already had qualified to the Olympics, and it was kind of giving up that to prioritize mental health and prioritize physical health too, because right after that I had like multiple reconstructive surgeries. But I'm wondering, like, what was that process like for you guys? I know this webinar is focused on body image and things like that, but I think there's a lot of like mental health components that go into it that I think body image ties itself to. That is just a part of, you're not in your routine anymore, you're not working out as much, your diet is a bit more flexible. At least for me, I was like, oh, great, I can eat ice cream now, right? But it's part of the issue that is ingrained, I feel like, as athletes, that we're so restricted a lot of the times with what we can eat and things like that. At least for myself, I can speak only for myself in this case, was like, oh, I can eat food now, right? I'm retired. I can like, enjoy life, and I can go out and I can do all these things, but also I have too much time on my hands. What do I do with that, right? So what did you guys find out of it? At least for me, was like, oh, I can do a lot of research, and that's how I ended up in the PhD program. Um, I have 40 hours of my time that I can use. Like, what do I do with 40 hours a week, right? At least, what was that in your experience? How did you manage that kind of like routine wise, professional wise? What was that like for you? I don't know, Erica. Um,
That's such a tough question, right? It's such a good question because I think for all of us, probably there's so many different emotions, and so much to kind of navigate after retirement. You reminded me of kind of thinking back to that feeling of like, gosh, I can eat whatever I want. I can stay up late. There's like this freedom, but it's almost overwhelming too, because it's almost like you haven't had, or at least I can speak for myself, like I hadn't had that kind of freedom. There was so much restriction and so much routine. So for me, it was actually pretty overwhelming because I was like, I don't know how to live without this sport that has been my whole world for, at that point, 22 years. Um, my coach at the time, I thought did something really smart. He had me sign up for the local gym, and I had to try a class in like every kind of class they offered. I am the least coordinated person any of you will ever meet. So like me trying these dance classes was just, I'm sure, comical for everyone. But I ended up finding spinning, and I ended up kind of getting more into running. So eventually kind of, I think, created some of that discipline back for myself. I now run marathons, right? I still get up at 5 o'clock in the morning because I've done it since I was 8 years old. And so I kind of had to, for my own, I think probably mental health and just comfort with who I am, I had to build that structure back in. So maybe I'll pause there and let the others kind of give their opinion, because for me it was very overwhelming, and I guess the summary is like I had to add some of that structure in a way that and has changed. So sorry, I said I would pause. One more thought. It has changed over time because there was the immediate retirement kind of in my late 20s and into my early 30s, and then we can talk more about like the transition to having children and having a family. And so yes, I have lots of routine in my life, but it has changed over time. So now I'll pause, give someone else the chance to to jump in.
Yeah, Erica, I'll build off of that. I think similarly, the biggest like maybe like downfall or like loss that I experienced when I retired is like the support and the structure that you get out of athletics. I think for a lot of people, no matter what sport you do, you have to be at practice at this time, you have to do this and then this and then this, and then you have to eat this and you have to do this, and then you only have this amount of time for your schoolwork or work or whatever other thing is happening in your life, and then you do this and this and this. And then you retire and it's like poof, it just all disappears into thin air. And so for the first few years out of retirement, I spent a lot of time just practicing different structures, like actually, like, do I want to work out before work? Do I want to work out 4 days a week? Do I want to work out? What do I want to do to work out? Is there seasons of the year that I don't work out? Is there seasons of the year that I work out more? You know what I mean? Like, it's probably taken me at least 5-6 years to understand, like, okay, this is kind of the natural rhythm of my body and the natural structure that I kind of fall into when I want to do these certain things. Like, if I'm training for something, I'm more structured. If I'm not training for something, I kind of let myself be more lenient. But there's beauty to being able to decide, but also, like Erica said, it's really overwhelming, and it's the illusion of choice. Like, you think you have all of these options. But I would just encourage you, like, try new things and don't overwhelm yourself. Like, just go try one thing. Okay, today I'm going to sign up for the gym and try this class this week, and that's it. Like, just kind of like keep your like mind's eye kind of close. Don't think super far out, because when you start to think super far out in athletics, you can, because there's that structure there and you understand how life is going to be. Like, the Olympics are every 4 years and there's a beat. In life, it's not that straightforward and nice, and there's no pretty bow on it. So it gets really overwhelming that you can't know what you're going to be doing in 3 years. It's very difficult to tell, especially when you're in your young adult life.
Yeah, totally. And Javi, what was that like for you?
For me, it was hard. Truthfully, it was very hard. I think when I retired, I had, like I said, I just had finished a world championship, and I was very known on the national team for losing a lot of weight while we were competing because of stress, the anxiety, the everything surrounding the competition. World championships is like 2 weeks there, new food, new people. So when I retired, I knew starting off the bat, I was underweight. So I did not work out for like months. And I think it was at the time, it was like, this is great. But I also felt lost in the sense of, in artistic swimming, it's a very, um, the judges are judging you by what they see. And you are very much told you have to look a certain way, you have to eat this. And I remember being at a competition and seeing coaches like take bread out of like the plates of athletes. And that's what I had in my mind. That was the normal. That's what I was known, that this is like an everyday thing. You need to watch what you're eating. When I retired and I was like hanging out with family and friends, and they were like, Javi, have this, this, and that. My automatic thought was, I can't have that. And that was very hard for me to like switch to be able to like kind of enjoy life. So in that sense, it was very hard because I didn't have my structure. I didn't have a structure of waking up at 6 a.m., having practice for 8 hours at the pool with my teammates. I was told what to eat, what to do. And then I retired and I had all this time in my hands. And on the other hand, I didn't want to work out. That was the last thing I wanted to do. I didn't want to go to the pool. I didn't want to go to the gym. I didn't want to like go to workout classes. But thankfully, my best friend owns a gym, and I remember he picked me up and he was like, "You're coming to class." I was like, "Oh my God." And I think it had been like 3 or 4 months of doing absolutely nothing. And when I tell you I died in his class, I literally died in his class. So I think I slowly started being able to see through the months. It did not happen fast, and I don't think I still do this every day, but I have slowly been able to enjoy working out and putting a structure without putting the pressure of you have to look a certain way. If you look a certain way and you weight a certain way, you're going to be better in the competition. And that mindset, I have slowly been able to change it. but I still have days when I'm like, I can't have ice cream because I'm 10 pounds overweight, because I still compare myself to what I used to look like when I was competing. And I think that's a process of retirement that is, it's very hard to accept as an athlete. Like, you will not look the way you look when you were competing, when you're not competing. So far it has been hard, but also good in many ways.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like you all have very different experiences from knowing you, now hearing your stories. It's interesting how, like, Erica, you had like a very structured, departure, I guess, from at least competitive, open water swimming. You still follow that structure. Erin, from knowing you, you're just very like, I listen to my body kind of person. Because Erin was my sounding board when I retired and when I was on the team. She was like, your body will tell you what it needs, and how you're kind of like describing this thing of like, oh, I'm battling this thing of like, I don't have structure and I need a support system to kind of like grab me into, a routine. And that's so interesting because I feel like this illustrates perfectly what retirement looks like, right? And we either have these very particular, like scenarios happening for us, but there's also kind of like a push and pull. I feel like, at least for me, it was like straight out of retirement. I was like, I'm gonna be the most dedicated person I can. And like, I'm gonna keep my same schedule and I'm gonna be at the gym at 5 a.m. and I'm gonna do it. And that lasted like 2 months. And then I was like, I want to sleep. I want to enjoy my life and not worry about the rest. And I feel like that's the stages we go through in retirement, right? Was there a time for you guys that, you had your mindset on one thing, or you had an influential person in your life that, made that change for you a little bit, or made your perspective change on retirement, especially as it relates to like exercise and like nutrition, especially since we're not eating at that point for nutrition performance, right? We're basically normal people at that point, but you have an athlete perspective, plus your body is very different. Plus, we're still active, but not as active. I feel like that's a constant push and pull that I know from, people going through this process, as to like, you go from working out 9+ hours a day to, maybe I remember I walked to the bus stop I absolutely needed to walk to, right? I wouldn't give another extra step I had to give. That's just me, in my experience. So what was that like for you guys? How did you navigate those changes in your life?
I think so I think my biggest challenge was probably, and this is going to sound so silly, but I mean it so sincerely. The hardest part of retirement for me was entering the workforce and having to sit all day. I I couldn't do it. I mean, like, I can barely do it now, and it's been quite a while, but that was like the hardest thing for me, was going to work and everyone just sits all day long. And before, when you're an athlete, that's the amount of time that you're training, literally, in the day. So that's a really big shift. And so, like, there's a lot of things that are just going to feel very uncomfortable, and you just kind of have to lean into the change and know that, like, your life is going to be very different. And I mean, Val, kind of like you said, like, I like just embracing where you're at and like meeting yourself where you're at. Like, if you don't want to work out for 3 or 4 months, good. You just competed for 15 years of your life. Congratulations, you get to take 3 or 4 months off. Your body needs the rest. I'm sure you have injuries that need to recover. Like, great, go for a walk, talk to your grandma. Like, do some things that you haven't done. Spend some time with some people that you haven't in a long time. And then, after you kind of feel like your body is coming back to life, then maybe you can explore some different ways to move your body that maybe, you're interested in. But um I kind of go in and out of structure, I guess, to like formally answer your question. Like, I personally prefer to like go into the gym with a plan, because I feel good when I have a plan. And there's things that I'm like, I set goals out like on a quarterly basis of like things that I want to accomplish, because for me, it just makes it easier for me to kind of like understand where I'm at and where I'm going. So I don't feel like I'm just like moving through life without a purpose. So I kind of set out to like move towards something, whether that's a goal or a mission statement or like however you want to formalize that for yourself. That helps me a lot. But some days, like this morning, I was supposed to get up at 5:30 and go to the gym, and I did not. I got up at 7:30 and it was great. So like it's a daily battle.
Well, I have to jump in because Erin, you're making me laugh. I hadn't thought about it in a while, but what I remember as soon as I retired, I literally was in tears after the first couple of weeks of work. I would come home crying because I couldn't sit for that long.
Yeah.
And I was still living in Evanston, actually near Northwestern. And my coach, I was still very close with. He got me. I'll have a hard time describing it, but it was like a chair that you like kneel into. I tried sitting on the book. To this day, you guys can see me rocking around. I'm standing. I'm at a standing desk. I'm on a balance board. Like I cannot sit because to your point, we spent, 8 hours a day swimming, being active and sitting at an office job. I was like, this is the worst. Like, I don't know how people do this. So the other thing that I've been thinking as we've been having this conversation, most I think folks on this call, and certainly those of us on the panel, are used to competing at a very high level in your sport and doing everything because you are trying to be the very best. And once I retired and kind of switched over into running marathons, one of the things that's great about running a marathon is I could be an hour, guys, like I could be a whole hour faster and I'm not going to win the marathon. And I could be an hour slower and I am not going to be the last person. And I tell myself that all the time because I do enjoy the training. I like the structure. It's really important for me. But I also try to stay realistic. Like, I'm not a great runner. I'm out there, I'm doing it, right? But, and I'm not built like a runner. And I don't, quote, look like, an elite runner. But I'm interested in nutrition and its effect on performance. And so, as I'm getting close to racing a marathon, I am careful about what I eat and I do pay attention to nutrition. And that's important to me, but I have to keep in perspective again, like we're not training for the Olympic team here. We're out there basically trying to survive the course. So let's, be real with it now that we've had the professional career. And so that's, a helpful way for me to kind of have the structure and have the love for athletics, but also keep some perspective and some balance. It took a while to get there. I've been retired for 16 years. So it was not an overnight thing.
I'm glad to hear that for sure because I just retired. But I think for me, same thing as you ladies have mentioned, sitting down at work was so hard. And I think an added thing for me was I would sit at work and my teammates would send me like videos and like over text message and photos of them at practice. And I'm like, I retired from that life of being able to just work out, enjoy my 8 hour day. Like I had like no care for anything. It was just go to practice and you wouldn't think anything else. To now being at an office sitting for 8 hours. And it was very hard at first. I also noticed right away that the reason why I didn't like going to the gym or going to the pool was because I just didn't want to swim. I didn't want to be in the water because I didn't know how to enjoy swimming or artistic swimming without doing a full on practice. So if I was swimming, it had to be more than 5K. If I was doing synchronized swimming, I was like looking for perfection and that was not enjoyable. And then I didn't like going to the gym because I just personally don't like going to the gym. I'm a water person at heart. So I was talking with my friends and I was like, guys, I really do need to find like a challenge that I can like do for myself without being good at it. Like I do not want to be good at it. So I signed up for a triathlon. So right now I'm training for my first half Ironman, which is crazy to think about. But I also know that like the swim portion is only 10% of the race in my head. And then it's like, okay, I'm gonna bike and then I'm gonna run. So I know I won't be last, like you said, and I won't be first. So I'm just like, if I want to get up and swim longer than the workout is required, then I'll do it. But it has helped me keep somewhat of a structure, um, without the perfection of wanting to be at the top of your career and trying to be like the best in the world when you're going to compete. So it's the first time that I can say that I am enjoying what I'm doing, like exercising. Um, and also because I'm just doing it with people that are doing it for fun. There's no like competition, there's no rivalry. And I think that that has been really good for me in the process that I am of my retirement.
Yeah, totally. And something I hear from all of you guys is a sense of like loss from your sport, right? It's a loss of your community, it's a loss of your identity in a way, it's a loss of your routine. But there's also kind of this tension between I'm a new person kind of thing, like what are my interests, what is my path, and then what should an athlete look like, right? Whether that's the new sport you're choosing or your previous sport and the amount we work out, right? And I heard it from a bunch, some of you, right? Like, oh, it's either running a marathon or a half Ironman, or Aaron, I know you like play very intense, like club and like, you know, you do like very intense hikes and things like that. It's not like the, oh, I can walk every day and that's my workout, right? Or I do a 10-minute, 15-minute spin class and that's my workout, which is a normal thing to do. That's like enough for your body to work out. And I feel like I share that in a lot of ways where I like, if I'm not like 3 hours at a gym, like I don't feel like I had a workout in. And that's like not even half what we used to do before. Right. And 3 hours is a long time. And today's a perfect example. I was like, I can run a 5K, right? I can. I am hurting right now. So I think like that is the perfect example of the push and pull we have, right? After we retire, it's like this loss of who we were, but also it's so innately part of our identity, right? Like, but also how do you navigate that, you know, I'm a normal person now. I can exercise regularly, but we still push for these extremes a little bit. How do you guys see that? And how were you able to negotiate that as you retired and now are more settled into your routine? Because we've been out of it for a while too.
For me, I think there's been different phases, right? There was kind of into my late 20s and my 30s. I'm now on my 40s. Like, and for me, it's been a lot of kind of self-talk, telling myself like this is the phase, this is the period I'm in right now, and this is what my body's going to look like. This is what my body's going to do. This is what food I need to support what I'm doing right now. The best example I can give was for me, and I don't know if there's others out there watching this that may have are going through something similar, but being pregnant, right, and having children is very different, and different ways you need to eat and different ways that you're able to exercise. And so that brought on a whole host of emotions and discomfort and anxiety for me. But what helped me was telling myself, like, you're not an elite athlete. For me, I wasn't at that point, right? Like, you're not an elite athlete right now. Like, you are fueling your body, you are exercising to support having children. And this is the phase that we're in right now. So, and then after that, right? Like, it takes a while to recover from that. And no one tells you that those little ones are up all night. You can't be up at 4:30 in the morning exercising because you didn't sleep all night long. So like, it's just been this constant, like, this is where I am right now. This is what my body's doing right now. And this is how I'm going to fuel it. And to your point earlier, Javier, like, you don't look, I do not look like I did when I was, the best open water swimmer in the world. I likely will not look that way again. And I'm going to have to be okay with that. But it's hard. And uh, I will say it has taken me a long time, but I don't know that I'm like there yet. Right. I think this is just another phase. And I think it'll probably be something that most of us, I don't want to say struggle with, but it's something that we have to kind of mindfully navigate for our most of our lives. And that's okay. But I think it's great that we're talking about it and kind of helping each other through it.
Totally. And Aaron, I don't know, what was your experience with that?
I mean, I value doing hard things. to kind of directly answer your question, like I think it's good for us when we're ready for it. And I think when you first retire from a sport, I personally was not ready to go like do something very intense. I was very much in like a recuperatory, rejuvenating, like working I was working on my mental health. I had a lot of injuries. That was kind of my focus. Like I would go to the gym, but like not like didn't need to be very intense. I couldn't do a lot because like both my shoulders were messed up, both my wrists were messed up. My back, I had a lot of issues with. I still have a lot of issues with my back. And then kind of over time, like I really like being competitive, and I think a lot of us do because we played sports at such a high level that I just started trying things that I could be competitive at. Like, for example, I play like really competitive doubles beach volleyball now. I'm not tall, like I'm not that good, but like now I've played for 5 years, and like after a while, like you get to be much better. Like, great. You find something that you can like that's not the sport that you did for a long time that you can enjoy, whatever that may be. And also have kind of found a love for the outdoors and some other hobbies that I just started exploring after. So a big exploratory phase, but I think I still just chase challenges because it's fun, and I think it's part of who we are as athletes.
Yeah, totally. Javi, what was that like for you?
For me, it is still a process. I think it's like you guys have said, I think it's a journey. It's not something that it's gonna happen overnight. Um, I think for me, the first thing that I had to get over was I'm no longer an elite level athlete. Um, and I think I had to also train the people that were around me because a lot of people around me they knew me as an athlete and they would talk to me as an athlete or they would introduce me to someone else like as an athlete. And I was no longer an athlete. And I think that made me have it put on my head like expectations of what I needed to look like when I was in those moments. So I think talking to the people around me really did help me be able to make the process easier. Um, and then just enjoying things that I would never do. Like I live in Washington, D.C. now. So when I retired, I was living in Puerto Rico and I moved to Washington, D.C. like a month after retirement. So I had like a whole new life to like start a new chapter. We started playing sand volleyball, we do kickball, we go on hikes. And then I think just trying all those things made me realize that hey, I do enjoy other things that are not just artistic swimming. And I don't need to be in the water for 8 hours to be able to feel in shape. But I did notice for a long period of time at first that I wasn't feeling great because I was also not eating great and not training. So I think when I started doing a little bit of exercise and keeping somewhat of a good, healthy diet, and that doesn't mean I don't eat ice cream, doesn't mean I don't go on my fast food run after being out at work. Like I still do that. But I think working out for 30 minutes or 45 minutes makes me feel healthier, not just physically, but also mentally. And that was a huge thing that took me a while to figure out for sure.
That's such an important point, though, that I think is learning to be healthy, right? Because we are most of us are competitive, right? But how do we learn how to exercise and eat in a way that's healthy and sustainable throughout the rest of our lives, not healthy and sustainable as an elite athlete? And it's such a big difference, but I think that's a really hard transition to navigate and takes a long time. I think it's a
Yeah,
really good point.
totally. Yeah, and I think that's a really good point as to like diet and like body image and like how do you even navigate not only what you're currently doing, like straight after retirement and stages after what you're eating, how much you're working out, but also your own body perception, right? As to not only how you perceive yourself, but how others perceive yourself and how that might be kind of like a juxtaposition. I don't know, Erin, do you have any particular, things that stood out to you in that process?
As far as like body image and transitioning, um, I think, I mean, obviously everyone's body changes a lot after they get out of sport. And um, for me, I mean, it's been, a little bit of time. Like you go from there's like when you're training, you're training to accomplish this specific thing and do this specific thing, whatever that is, a race, a dive, yada yada. And so you're doing all this like auxiliary training to do this thing. But now when you transition into life, you're moving for like Javi said, like mental health and physical health. So, it's more of finding something that you enjoy, or if you're training for like aesthetics or other things, like, you get into weightlifting for different reasons than getting better at your sport. So there's just like a transition of a mindset, like there's not so much pressure on you, and it's hard to like let go of the pressure on yourself because a lot of it is in your head. Like you don't realize that I mean, you've been conditioned to go and be the best at what you are doing. And you have to kind of uncondition yourself a little bit because now you have other things on your plate, right? You have to pay your bills and you have to go to work and you have other obligations, whether that's parenthood or friendships or work obligations, or you picked up another side gig or all of these other things rather than just doing your sport or just doing school. There's more on your plate than just a few things. So there's more of a juggling act going on. So it's just a little bit of like you have to kind of reframe your mindset.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like at least for me, you were kind of that sounding board, right? As to like, well, I'm not working out 10 hours a day. I am not restricting myself a lot because I was the type of person that restricted a lot when I was swimming. And I remember I had awesome teammates like Aaron and other teammates that were like, Val, are you having breakfast this morning after practice, right? Yes, we'll see you at the dining hall. Yes, they kept you accountable, right? As to that. And she was a really fundamental person, at least in my retirement process, as to also like be kind to yourself. And at least Aaron, I want to ask you that last question as to like, where does that stem from you as to like being not only that for yourself, but also being that person for your teammates, right? Which I think is so important. And that's what we should be encouraging, the young, swimmers, artistic swimmers, open water swimmers, divers that are listening right now, how can you be that person for someone else if you're noticing certain patterns or you're experiencing that yourself, and keeping other people kind of like accountable to not go through hardships that some of us go through in those cases?
I think I think like conversations like this and just, I think we were good teammates and I could kind of see some of the things that you were going through. And I think you know so much about your teammates and you know so much about their body language. I think that's really important. Like we're not necessarily talking to our teammates because we play aquatic sports, we're under a water a lot, but you are around your teammates a lot and you can see their body language and see like their posture tells you a lot about what's going on in their head. And if you pay attention to those things and like, that doesn't look quite right, like always like a nice little check-in, like, hey, like is everything okay? Like what's going on these days? And just reaching out and making sure, caring for another person as a human, not just as your teammate. And even if you don't quite get along, it's always good to be like, hey, sending me some good vibes. Like if you butt heads, even it's always good to care after another human, especially when you're playing the same sport and going after the same things.
Yeah, totally. I don't know, Erica, Javi, did you guys have like similar experiences in that end, kind of like being there for someone? How did you navigate also kind of like the nutritional changes, like exercise changes in your routines once you retired?
I think for sure, for me, I have somewhat stayed involved with the sport, not just with my national team, but also with my friends that I met while competing around the world. And I think artistic swimming it's not like many other sports. We are very close because we are not that many swimmers. So like we all have a group chat, like, and I'm talking about like worldwide. Like I think I talk to these people still every single day. Um, and I think I have seen some of my friends struggle, and it's hard because, like I said before, my sport is a sport of perception and what you look like, and that can come with very, very bad habits, whether it's not eating or whether it's like mental. It can be very damaging to someone's self-esteem. And I have been in that position and I have seen it. And it's not something that I wish on anyone. But I think being able to have conversations like this, and I think also open the door to changing the sport. The sport doesn't have to be, you don't have to look a certain way. You can be the best in the world and look different. You just have to be yourself. And I believe that when you are truly yourself, not like in every aspect of it, you perform better. I truly believe that. So I think a lot of the times in my sport, it's about not comparing yourself to other people and making sure that it is okay to take a step back, take a break, and like kind of like restart and then go back to the sport. But for sure, I think, like you mentioned before, I think knowing people's body language, knowing how people act on pool deck. And my sport is a sport that you're holding your breath for what, 2 minutes underwater. You can tell when someone is very healthy and is doing the sport in a very healthy way. And you can tell when someone's not doing it in a healthy way. And it's important that us athletes that we go out to them and be like, hey, like make sure you're eating, make sure you're hydrating, like you're gonna be just fine when you compete. But it's important that the people around you are able to do that for you as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally.
Tough comments to follow. Those are spot on, and I think really insightful. I guess the only addition I have is I'm trying to think back to kind of when I first retired and some friends that were retiring at the same point. And I think it is helpful to, not in a way that we're kind of comparing body type, but comparing like, what are you doing? Where are you how are you exercising? Like just even listening to how someone, like what their routine looks like. And like Erin was saying earlier, like maybe I want to try exercising in the evening. Maybe I'm only a morning but like reaching out as someone that's going through it, being okay reaching out to others and kind of asking questions, asking for support, asking for help, I think is also important and necessary, because so many of us have just done the same thing for so long and this is all we know. It's really hard to break out of that. So I hope we can kind of be examples for each other and supportive of each other, because it's a different path for everyone, but many similar challenges.
Yeah, totally. And I think something that I've heard all of you guys kind of like talk about is this comparison part, not only to ourselves, but also to other people. And I think we go through a very weird phase in our retirement where we're not just looking at pictures of our old selves when we were like in our prime. I know I'm guilty of that and being like, wait, I don't look remotely similar, right, to what I looked like. And even if I like think about how did I even feel about myself in that point, you were always like judgmental, right? Like, oh, I'm not exactly how I want to look, or I'm not the weight I should be at, I'm not the fat percentage I should be at. But I was like pretty fit if I look at the pictures, right? But even in that moment, I was so, like judgmental of myself. And now thinking through, it's like my body changes. I'm a Latina, I have curves, I build muscle really quickly, which is, now I play tennis and I haven't lifted in months and years, and I build muscle just from being active, right? And that's something we're not used to when we're training. We're like, oh, your body changes so quickly. And I think I've talked to a lot of people through my own research as well, now as a scholar and working with athletes, and it's really interesting to see not only the self comparisons, but also the impact that social media has on these comparisons. And you're not only exposed to yourself, right, through memories and through your Instagram page and, oh, yourself 5 years ago, right? But you're also kind of like presented with this narrative of like athletes now, you know, like new meets that are coming up and people that maybe you grew up looking at and now you're like more exposed to, at least the visual part of like body composition and also just general fitness content too, right? And the impact that has on our perceptions. I don't know if you guys have gone through a similar thing where you're like, wait, you know, like I'm trying to follow these like fitness influencers online, but that's actually kind of creating a counter narrative in my head as to like, oh, I should look like that. I should exercise more. I should watch what I eat more, rather than having a more self-aware perception of what my body needs now and how should I take care of my body now that I'm retired.
I'm guilty of that for sure. I think Facebook loves to remind us how we used to look like back in the day. Um, and I think that's something that I have been trying to be very aware of, trying not to look at the picture in that way. Look at the picture as a memory, not look at the picture as like, oh my God, this is how I used to look like, and I don't look like that. So I think I have slowly tried to change the narrate of like how I look at the picture. When it comes to social media, I think as athletes, I and knowing that I still have friends, is very hard for me to see some pictures and being like, whoa, they look so fit and I don't look like that.
Yeah.
But I also have come to terms, and this was very hard for me to truly accept, like really hard for me to accept. I look back at the best shape I was, but I was also very unhealthy. I did not feel mentally healthy. I struggled with my mental health. I struggled with the way I looked. And now I feel like I'm full of life and happy. And yes, maybe I don't have an eight pack and I don't look the way I used to, but I'm a lot happier now in my life than I was when I was competing. So I have come to terms that it's just impossible for me to be able to look like that, be happy, be able to be there for my family and my friends. Like I just cannot do all of it. Um, so I feel like now I'm just in a way better place mentally and physically, even though to some people and to myself at times I'm just like, wow, I used to look better back then. But mentally it's just so much better.
Well, Javi, I have never had an eight pack. That will never be in my future. But I'm also, it's just so good to hear how happy you are and how well retirement is going for you. It's amazing. Especially just a year into it. It's fantastic. Um, Interestingly, I think mine is a little bit different in that when I look back at pictures or see things come up on social media, I don't like the way I looked when I was at my very best as an open water swimmer. I had about 20 pounds more in my back and shoulders than I do right now. And so there's that little voice that's like, gosh, what if you would look different? Would you have been, better? And you can't go down that path, right? And so that's where I've had to consciously tell myself, I had a great career. I'm proud of my career. And I looked the way I did to support that career. um, it would be unusual if I had 20 pounds more in my back and shoulders now without swimming 50 miles down rivers, right? Like I don't need that. And so that's where it's been helpful for me to, again, this is over 16 years, right? Go through the different phases of I am eating and exercising in a way that's supporting my lifestyle right now. And I looked that way then, and I look this way now, and I try to be okay with that, right? Some days that goes better than others. But thinking about it in that way, I think has been the most helpful thing for me.
Yeah, it's so interesting how, you know, every journey is so different because in my experience, it was the other way around. I was so under fueling that I was not performing maybe how I could have performed, right? If I was feeling my body the correct way. And there was literally a webinar we had on Wednesday we had an awesome nutritionist, you know, Erica Bainey, who was talking about how throughout your athletic career, you have to be so conscious about what your body needs, right? And maybe you were at that stage, right? Of you were feeling your body to what it needs. And, you had that muscularity and that build that you had to have at that moment to perform as an athlete. But I think that speaks to, also Javi, what you were saying, kind of like this idea when we're athletes, we have that idea of the perfect body that is fueled by social constructions of beauty, right? And what social media tells us that's the perfect body that we should have and that we should aspire to. And hearing you guys talk, it's so interesting because it makes me really think about, where do these ideas come from, and how do we even perceive our own bodies and what we need our bodies to do and perform? Because as athletes, we need our bodies to do the job, right? We need our bodies to sustain ourselves through 9 hours of practice every day, through hard competitions. Erica, in your case, yours were like extreme, right? Like 25K and above. We need our bodies to be there for us, right? And this narrative that our body has to look a certain way in order to appeal to a specific beauty standard or athletic standard, especially now in social media age where that is, commodified in a lot of ways. I guess my last question to you all before we open up to Q&A is really, how do you see this distinction going as to how your body is set now after retirement to fuel your needs versus how you see it in terms of body image, right? What you think your body should look like, what you struggle with or don't struggle with or are more comfortable with now, at least in my experience. I was very low weight, under fueled when I was a professional athlete, and now that I'm out of it, it's an interesting thing, right? Like I'm learning still 5 years out. My body looks very different. I'm more muscular now, which is interesting. You wouldn't think that, right? But I'm playing tennis a lot of the times and I'm building a lot of muscle and I don't look as lean, but my body is fueled. I have the energy I need through the day to get me through work and, social relationships and intense tennis practice and running and but my body looks different. And it's what you're talking about, Javi, that push and pull, right? That I don't look like I used to look, but I feel better and I'm happier and I'm not worried about what my body looks like anymore. I'm worried about its functionality, right? What it's doing for me. So I'm wondering how you guys have navigated that, and especially how you see it in the social media age where we're constantly fed this idea that skinny is better, very muscular and very like toned is better as well. I'm wondering how that has changed for you guys.
I think as an athlete, when I was competing, it was very hard to like try to be a specific body. Like I have said multiple times now, like my sport is just you want long legs, long arms. You at the end of the day, if you think about it in like perspective of water, the lighter you are in the water, it's easier to just hold yourself up in the water. Like it's just we all know that. But I think it does come with like with social media, what you see on social media, what you expect to look like from social media. And I think it comes from all the aspects, not just the athletic world, but like how we see like famous people looking and how now people are like taking medicine to lose weight and not go to the gym. I personally work at a plastic surgery office and I see firsthand how people come in because they don't like the way they look. And that made me change my perspective being in the environment that I am now. And I think back when I was an athlete, I kind of lacked confidence because I always thought like, again, you always think you're not good enough. You're always trying to push to get better. And I think now I'm very happy with the way I look. I'm very happy with the way I'm eating. Yes, I don't look that way, but I feel better and I am way more confident. And the people around me notice that. It's like the first time that I have ever had friends come up to me and be like, wow, you're so confident. So I think it's mainly because of that. It's because I have seen people come into the office and be like, I want to change this and that. Um, because I'm comparing myself to social media, which I think it's modern world nowadays, I guess.
Yeah, totally. And you, Eric?
I guess I'll kind of address maybe the later part because I think that a lot of that was true. I had a harder time with the kind of immediate post-retirement where I was maybe on social media a little bit more too. I'm now in a phase, right, where I have two little kids and it's just like a struggle to get through the day, guys. Like I'm chasing after them. Like my focus is on keeping myself healthy and injury free and spending time with kids and setting a good example for them. I want them to see me exercise because I want them to like exercise. I want them to know what it means to be healthy. Um, I want to eat, I want to go out to ice cream with them, right? And eat dessert and like have a healthy relationship with food because that's the model that I want to be. That's the example that I want to set. So in some ways, it's actually gotten easier for me as I've entered this phase of being a parent. And my focus isn't, as an athlete, in some ways, what we're doing, selfish is the wrong word, but you're very focused on yourself and on your body because you need to be. That's what's going to, like, that's what we're doing here, right? Is getting our body to perform at the very highest level. So now being in a phase of life where my focus is on my children and doing everything I can to support and care for them, in some ways has made it easier for me because the focus just, and I'm mom, right? Like I'm not the one in the pictures. I'm the one taking the pictures. There's not pictures of me to look at this point. So in some ways it just gets easier because you're just surviving, getting through the phase of having young children. So a very different phase, I realize, but maybe there's some folks watching that can relate to that. So that's what I'll share.
Totally. No, thank you both for sharing so much. And time has gone by so quickly, which is incredible. It always happens in every one of the underwater chats. We could have this go on for the whole day. But I do want to get to a couple questions we got from the audience. So we'll do a very quick Q&A section. We actually have specific questions for each of you. So I'll just go ahead and jump in. One is for Javi. Someone in the audience is asking, how do you deal with, those social media comparisons, especially as now you navigate being outside of the sport and seeing people still in competition? How do you keep yourself in check as to, what that stage in life was like for them and now what that's like for you?
Um, Oh my God, that's a really good question. I think the other day, at the last World Championship in Doha, Nuria, she's an artistic swimmer from Mexico. She's 7 days away from competing at her third Olympic Games. She posted a story that said it was a picture of her, and it was a public story. That's why I'm sharing it. It was a picture of her wearing clothes and her shorts, and she was like kind of pulling her like pants to the side so you could see how much weight she had lost from the start of the competition of training to like 7 days into the competition. And that really changed my perspective on the way they look right now, the way my friends look right now. They look like that because they are at the top of their training or their career to perform at the highest moment they have to in that moment. They don't necessarily look like this every single day. Like when you look at an athlete on social media and they're at Olympic trials or they're at the Olympics, they don't necessarily look like this every single day for the whole year. And that was very eye-opening for me because I was comparing myself to the way I was at competition, but I never thought about, oh, wait, I didn't actually look like that training. I only looked like that when I was like competing like 2 weeks, 3 weeks off, because your body can hold that amount of weight or that perspective that you have in your body for that moment because you are competing at the highest level. But even when you're training as a professional athlete, you don't necessarily look that way. So that's how I kind of like changed my mindset of like, oh, they look this specific way because they're competing at a world championship final. So
Yeah.
that helped me a lot.
Totally. No, thank you. And for Erica, really quick question. Someone in the audience is sharing, I'm a parent and I'm wondering, how do you set an example as a mom for up and coming athletes in terms of body image and how you talk to your kids about, being okay in their own skin and how to fuel themselves for, sports?
It's such a tough question. It's such an important topic. It's a tough question. it's something I've thought a lot about before having kids. And then, now that I'm 7 years into this journey, um, one of the things, so I do exercise first thing in the morning. I run marathons. It's really important to me. It's like my only time when no one is right, is like really early in the morning. Um, but sometimes I feel guilty, especially on, Saturday mornings when my husband is home with the kids for maybe a longer period of time. But I tell myself, and I have heard others say this as well, um, that I shouldn't feel guilty. I'm setting an example. I'm out there and they know that when they wake up in the morning, mom's not there because she's swimming or she's running. And when I come back, I'm eating healthy foods and I'm eating meals with them. I don't skip meals. I have snacks with them and we do active things, right? So it's not just about my run or my swim in the morning. It's if it's not raining, we're outside. My 7-year-old's teaching me how to throw a football. Again, no coordination here, but I'm learning to like throw a football, play tennis, kind of. Just trying to set an example for them that's a healthy, active lifestyle. And also trying to remind my 7-year-old that it's not always about winning. I'm like, I don't know where he gets so competitive. Like, why is he so competitive? So I just have to also remind, like, we can do this just to have fun. It doesn't always have to be about winning. Because those of us on the call probably have a little bit of a competitive edge, and that's good in certain settings.
Yeah.
So
just a little bit competitive, I would say, just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Yeah. I don't know where he gets it.
But thank you so much to our incredible panelists, Erin, Javier, and Erica. It was so fantastic to hear about your aquatic journeys. And we invite all of you to join us in the next edition of this webinar series. Stay tuned for more information on the Pandem Aquatic social media pages. We have more than 20 underwater chats coming your way this summer. So please stay tuned. It's going to be awesome. So hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you so much. Goodbye, everyone. Bye.